believe in a God that tells you lies, or do you believe in me? Do you believe in a God that brings you down? Do you believe in a God that wears the crown? Do you believe in a God that makes you bow, or do you believe in me? Do you believe in a God that satisfies? Do you believe in a God that opens eyes? Do you believe in a God that tells you lies, or do you believe in me? Do you believe in a God that brings you down? Do you believe in a God that wears the crown? Do you believe in a God that makes you bow, or do you believe in me?
It's Beyond Common Sense. It's Lanny Sense with Lanny Swerglo, KCAA's resident gay, woke, liberal, pot-smoking, race-mixing, tree-hugging, left-handed, science-affirming, Jewish, humanist, atheist, a white evangelical Christian nationalist, worst nightmare. And here is their worst nightmare live at KCA's radio studios. And welcoming you to my radio show, Lanny Sense. Hey, we've got a great show tonight. I've got a lot of things we're going to talk about. But right now, the big breaking news. Jennifer Lopez files for divorce from Ben Affleck after 2 years of marriage. Hey, now that is big news, right? Well, no, there's other big news. And of course, that's the Democratic National Convention going on, where today they have officially nominated Kamala Harris for president of the United States. And it's an amazing situation. I've been watching what's going on at that convention. It is crazy excitement and jubilation. And we've got to get her elected. We certainly don't want to get Trump elected, do we? For a lot of reasons. But I've got something here I'm going to tell you about President Trump. There is a new group out there called Evangelicals for Harris. It's kind of been assumed that evangelicals are wrapped up in the Republican Party and are voting for Trump. But there is a group called Evangelicals for Harris, and they claim to have 200,000 signatures on a pledging to vote for Kamala Harris and Walz for vice president. It always amazed me, and these evangelical Christians have obviously come to their senses, but most still haven't. You know, what's really amazed me is that when it comes to Donald Trump, I am really glad I am not a Christian, as I would be racked with overwhelming guilt, because not only do I hate the sin, but I hate the sinner. It would seem that Christians would be entitled to make an exception when it comes to having to profess love for Trump. It has always boggled my mind how pious evangelical Christians in particular have so embraced this man, who is the real world embodiment of the 5 1/4 of the 7 deadly sins. Okay, here we go. Let's talk about how Trump is the embodiment of the 5 1/4 of the 7 deadly sins. All right, sin number 1, deadly sin number 1, lust. Now, what is lust? Lust is intense or unbridled sexual desire. From Stormy Daniels and at least 16 other women who have been sexually harassed and assaulted by Trump, his lustful desires are as public as his orange complexion, as well as his 3 marriages to blonde bombshells. While married to Ivana Trump, he had an affair with Marla Maples, who he married after divorcing Ivana. Here's some quotes from Trump about lust. Quote, "You know, it really doesn't matter what the media writes as long as you got a young and beautiful piece of ass." End quote. Here's another quote. Quote, "I've said if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her." Unquote. This is the man we want for president, right? All right. What's another deadly sin? Greed. Greed is an excessive pursuit of material goods. Trump has cheated on taxes, didn't pay his bills or workers, filed bankruptcy in order not to pay his debts. And here's some quotes about Trump on greed. Quote, "I am a greedy person. I shouldn't tell you that. I'm greedy. I've always been greedy. I have money, right? End quote. Another point. Quote, the point is that you can't be too greedy. End quote. And he proclaimed during the first presidential debate in 2016 that not paying federal taxes, quote, makes me smart, end quote. Okay, another deadly sin, wrath. Now, wrath is a strong, vengeful anger or indignation, retributory punishment for an offense. Some of the more notable firings and forced resignations include Jeff Sessions, John Bolton, Rex Tillerson, Steve Bannon, James Comey, Anthony Scaramucci, Michael Short, Renee Priebus, Sean Spicer, Preet Bharara, Sally Yates, Angela Reed, Chris Christie, Mike Flynn, Alexander Vidman, Maria Yanovich, Gordon Sondland, Michael Atkinson, Glenn Fine. Well, there's a lot more. And if there's a complete list. If you go to a search engine, type in firings from Donald Trump, it just goes on and on of the people he has fired who upset him. Then there are invectives and threats he has tossed at Stormy Daniels and the other women in Trump's life. Quote, every woman lied when they came forward to hurt my campaign. Quote, total fabrication. The events never happened. Never. All of these liars will be sued and the election is over. Well, the election in 2016 is over and he still hasn't sued them. All right. Let's go to some more quotes about wrath. Quote, my motto is always get even. When somebody screws you, screw them back in spades, end quote. Here's another quote. Quote, if I were running The View, I'd fire Rosie O'Donnell. I mean, I'd look at her right tight in that fat, ugly face of hers. I'd say, Rosie, you're fired, end quote. Another quote on wrath. Quote, I will say this, Hillary Clinton has got to go to jail, end quote. He's denying that now. He's denying he ever said that. He never said he wanted Hillary Clinton in jail. What a liar. Okay, another of the 7 deadly sins, pride. Pride is an excessive view of oneself without regard for others. All right? Here's some quotes from Donald Trump about pride. Quote, the beauty of me is that I'm very rich, unquote. Another, quote, I think the only difference between me and the other candidates is that I'm more honest and my women are more beautiful, end quote. Another quote on pride. Quote, my IQ is one of the highest, and you all know it. Please don't feel so stupid or insecure. It's not your fault. End quote. We got a lot of quotes on pride. Quote, I think I'm actually humble. I think I'm much more humble than you would understand. End quote. Quote, I know more about ISIS than the generals do. Believe me. End quote. Quote, I think nobody knows more about campaign finance than I do, end quote. Quote, I know more about courts than any human being on earth, end quote. Quote, I understand politicians better than anybody, end quote. Quote, nobody knows more about trade than me, end quote. Quote, I know more about renewables than any human being on earth, end quote. Quote, I think nobody knows more about taxes than I do, maybe in the history of the world, end quote. Quote, look, as a builder, nobody in the history of this country has ever known so much about infrastructure as Donald Trump, end quote. And it goes on and on and on. That guy is so full of himself. Pride, that's another deadly sin. All right, so another deadly sin is envy. Envy is awareness of advantages enjoyed by another joined with the desire to possess the same advantage. Let me read that again. Awareness of an advantage enjoyed by another joined with the desire to possess the same advantage. That's envy. Well, does Trump envy? He envies Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Xi Jinping, Viktor Orban, and a multitude of other right-wing authoritarian rulers for their control of the media, arresting adversaries, and brooking no opposition. He has always been envious of Barack Obama, an envy that has become an obsession. How much of an obsession? Just look at the birth thing to begin with, and it's gone on and on and on. He talked about, I'm going to destroy everything that Barack Obama did as president, including the Affordable Care Act, which, of course, has not happened. Okay, now let's go to gluttony. An excessive ongoing eating of foods or drink. That's what gluttony is, an excessive and ongoing eating of food or drinks. Okay, here is where Trump only qualifies for half of a deadly sin. He doesn't drink, but he does weigh 243 pounds and it's a BMI of 30. So we'll give him half a gluttony sin. And finally, the last deadly sin is sloth. Now, sloth is an excessive laziness or the failure to act and utilize one's talents. Well, Trump is not a sloth. If only he were, the other 6.5 deadly sins wouldn't matter. There you go. So anyway, the evangelicals for Trump. Anyway, hey, listen, if you'd like to join in on the conversation in tonight's radio show, please call in. We'd love to hear from you. You want to talk about evangelicals for Trump? You want to talk about Trump? You want to talk about Harris? You want to talk about Biden? You want to talk about anything, whatever. You want to talk about cannabis? You want to talk about climate change? You want to talk about that strange person down the street from where you live? Give us a call at 888-909-1050. That's 888-909-1050. I'd love to talk with you about that. Okay. All right. Well, I like to talk about, I like always say, talk about cannabis. And I've got a little story here about cannabis I thought I'd like to tell you about. And that is that, you read these, you hear these things as marijuana causes changes in the brain. And so everybody says, oh my gosh, you shouldn't be using marijuana because it causes changes in the brain. Well, what's the big deal? Here it is. This was a headline on CNN. It said, quote, casual marijuana use may damage your brain. Time magazine, in addition to CNN's headline, chimed in with this, quote, recreational pot use harmful to young people's brains. This sky is falling media frenzy was set off by an article published in 2014, so it was a while ago, in the Journal of Neuroscience by Harvard Medical School researcher Jody Gilman. All right, this is a peer-reviewed scientific publication. And the publication said something, I guess, that triggered CNN and Time Magazine to sit there and to cry, marijuana causes changes in the brains, especially of young people. All right, what does this report do? The report purports to document a direct correlation between cannabis use and changes to the gray matter, density, volume, and shape of the developing brain in people under 25. What it didn't report, and this is important, was any correlation between these brain changes and anything at all. They said, yeah, well, there's a change in density and volume, but it didn't show that it changed anything. But you wouldn't know that from the media hype, would you? Because all they talked about is the changes. And they went into overdrive about how dangerous marijuana must be because it causes changes in the brain, even though they couldn't find anything that those changes affected. Now, this study was based on one MRI study of adolescents that used marijuana versus those that did not. The researchers assumed, and you know what they say when you assume, the researchers assumed that any differences found were due solely to marijuana use. Even if the changes were caused by marijuana use, they didn't present any evidence that those changes were bad. So first of all, they couldn't even be sure that these changes in the brain were caused by marijuana. They just make that assumption. And once again, they didn't produce anything there showing that the changes were bad. The fact is, lots of things cause changes in the brain. And here's a very interesting one. Prayer is one of those things that causes changes in your brain. So marijuana causes changes in the brain, and prayer causes change in the brain. But our government is not spending $20 billion a year to keep people from praying. We have all these ads on billboards and telling kids, don't use marijuana. It changes your brain. But so does prayer. But you don't see the government spending one dime telling kids don't pray. Here's an interesting thing. Andrew Newberg, MD, professor and director of research for the Myrna Bryant Center of Integrative Medicine at the Thomas Jefferson University and Hospital, has for decades been studying the effect of religion and spiritual experiences on the brain. Decades. This doctor has been studying the effect of religion on the brain. Based on his studies and that of his research team, Dr. Newberg has written that spiritual actions like prayer changes the human brain for the better. He published a book called How God Changes Your Brain, Breakthrough Findings from a Leading Neuroscientist. His research details the claim shows that 1, not only do prayer and spiritual practice reduce stress, but just 12 minutes of meditation per day may slow down the aging process. So, prayer and spiritual practice reduce stress, and at just 12 minutes of meditation a day will slow down the aging process. Don't we all want to do that? Number 2, he showed, contemplating a loving God rather than a punitive God reduces anxiety and depression and increases feelings of security, compassion, and love. Okay, so what is his two findings? Prayer, meditation help slow the aging process, reduce stress, and contemplate. The key to it is contemplating a loving God rather than a punitive God reduces anxiety and depression and increases feeling of security, compassion, and love. Now, these are all positive benefits for sure. But these exact same benefits can be found elsewhere, like in marijuana. An avalanche of research and a mountain of anecdotal evidence from a lot of you listening to this radio show who use marijuana regularly can document the ability of marijuana to produce results very similar to those claimed by Dr. Newberg for prayer. Reduce stress, slow down the aging process, and reduces anxiety and depression and increases feelings of security, compassion, and love. That's what people say about marijuana all the time. So then that's what marijuana does. The same thing prayer does. And unlike prayer, the user doesn't have to fret over whether they are using loving or punitive marijuana. Remember, in Dr. Newberg's study, you have to be worshiping and in touch with a loving God, not a punitive God. So how are you going to determine whether the God you are worshiping or meditating with is loving or punitive? I mean, the Christian God, look at the Bible. My gosh, this is the Christian God is this bearded white old man with anger management problems. So you're going to have to figure out which God that you're using to meditate and pray with to make sure it's a loving God and not a punitive God. But you don't have to worry about that with marijuana, because you don't have to worry about whether the marijuana you're consuming is punitive or loving. Dr. Newberg's scholarly book reveals that, quote, intense prayer and meditation permanently change numerous structures and functions in the brain, altering your values and the way you perceive reality, end quote. Let me read this again. Dr. Newmer's scholarly book reveals that, quote, intense pressure and meditation permanently change numerous structures and functions in the brain, altering your values and the way you perceive reality. Prayer changes your brain, alters the way you see reality, and alters your values. Is that a good thing? Why is it when intense prayer causes changes in the brain and that alters your values and your perception of reality, why is it a good thing when it's prayer that does that? But when marijuana causes alteration of the brain's and values and perceived reality, it's bad. Not that either the marijuana or prayer study offered any evidence that the changes in the brain were good, bad, or indifferent. That's it. The studies showed that marijuana caused change in the brain. Didn't, once again, I said at the very beginning, it didn't show that they did anything good, bad, or indifferent. It didn't show anything. And the same thing with the prayer studies. It said, yeah, there's some changes in the brain, but it didn't once again show whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. It was just assumed that those changes must be good if it was caused by prayer, and just like it was assumed that it must be bad if it was marijuana that caused the changes. No evidence that the changes caused anything, either prayer or marijuana. But all the papers said, hey, prayer causes changes in the brain. Prayer causes you to change your value. Prayer causes you to change your views of your reality. That's good. But if marijuana does the same thing, that's bad. Unlike prayer masquerading in pseudo-scientific terminology, it is scientifically established that marijuana provides its legendary benefits through the powerful anti-inflammatory action and other properties of the 60-plus cannabinoids found in cannabis that help reduce pain, alleviates anxiety, mitigates depression, delays the onset of Alzheimer's, prevents cancer, and provides a virtual cornucopia of other benefits. Marijuana consumers understand these benefits. Even with all the legal hassles and expenses involved, they continue to extol its value and encourage others to use it. And for that, they are damned, humiliated, and even imprisoned, while those who extol prayer get tax breaks and adulation. That's so stupid. But you know what isn't stupid? We've got a caller on the line who must be very intelligent because he called into the show. Welcome to Lanny Sense.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. Who's calling in?
My name's Rob, Lanny.
Hi, Rob. Thank you for calling in. It's wonderful. Did you are you the one that posted on Facebook about about how the club changed your life in 91?
Yes, sir. That's me.
That is, I have heard multiple stories. I ran the clubs for 20 years, and I've heard multiple stories of people, how the club changed their lives. I mean, gay kids, gay teenagers, they feel so alone, they feel so by themselves and this kind of stuff, and they come to the club and suddenly they're surrounded by other...
Surrounded completely.
Yeah, and the atmosphere of the club wasn't just that gay is okay. The atmosphere of the club was gay is better. But listen, go ahead.
Well,
tell me your story.
Well, let me start with the gay right there. I'm going to be honest with you. For the first 6 months I hung out at that club, I didn't even know that it was a gay club.
Which one was it? The City?
The City nightclub in downtown Portland, yeah.
Okay.
I was 18 years old, and I had moved from South Dakota to Portland with a friend of mine. I'd gotten a bunch of money in a settlement for losing a finger. And I headed west, Lanny. I was going to go seek my fortune, just a South Dakota boy thinking he's going to strike it rich on the West Coast. Well, I made it to Portland, and they robbed me, left me homeless on the streets. And I found a place called St. Vincent de Paul Youth Shelter. I'm sure you might have heard of that. A lot of the people that hung out at your club were regulars down there, too. That and the Outside Inn You may have heard of them too.
Oh yeah. We used to do fundraisers for the Outside In.
Yes, sir. I remember that. I was a part of that, but you can only stay at those shelters for so long, you know. And I tell you what, it's hard to explain because I wasn't really into the scene too much as I was. I really liked the club. I really liked being there. The atmosphere was so accepting. It was so. I was in a world where I was alone, Lanny. I've come from, 2,000 miles away in South Dakota. I was young. I didn't know anything about anything. And, where you think I would have felt the most uncomfortable from my background is where I felt the most welcome. The people that were like me in my world, they turned on me. They didn't, my mother didn't want me to come home. She didn't want nothing to do with it. My family didn't want nothing to do with it. I found the club, and you could get in. You could hang out there all night. You could sleep there. Nobody would bother you. My favorite place in your club was a door. You go up the stairs. I remember the trains upstairs.
the pool table room.
Yes, and then down there's a long black hallway with a door that said the other side. And that was the alternative room. That was really hardcore in there. That was the hardcore alternative music, hardcore.
It was a punk.
Punk kind of scene. Yeah, it was darker and a little more kind of in tune for me. I was a Midwest boy who listened to heavy metal.
That's where the Portland Police Bureau had issued a report that there were vampires found there.
Well, there were. However, I mean, a self-proclaimed vampire who is just living their best life isn't really something that's a threat to anybody.
Yeah.
These were people I knew quite well. I can't remember anybody's name, and that's awful. That's terrible of me, but this was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And these people were fantastic. I mean, and I guess the reason I didn't know it was gay is because nobody bothered me, Lanny. Nobody touched me. Nobody molested me. Ever. Not once ever. There was never anything, never. And it's not like that's a fear of mine, but if anybody is out there living in fear that something that is happening, it's just not. And it's weird that we live in a world where we can't smoke weed. I was raised very Catholic and very Baptist. I had to turn my back on that stuff because it's just insanity at its worst. And it's, it's just, they try to conform, you try to be right, and it's never going to work. You're never going to be accepted. Doesn't matter who you are, your background. Once you get turned on, once they see you as the enemy, you're finished.
Well,
and the only people left for you are the people who were turned on, the other enemies. That's the people society didn't want.
Well, the people who don't necessarily subscribe to middle-class white Christian values.
Right, which is where my life kind of started, but then there was a divorce that happened, and we really went a different direction. I ended up Baptist in a Baptist church, going to the Sunday barbecues, and life was a little bit different. I went from trucker white family to Baptist black family, and predominantly throughout my life, that's how I was raised.
Uh-huh.
So I was raised with a completely different set of values than a lot of people really do. I learned racism through the other side. I didn't learn racism from a white father being racist, even though the stepdad was racist. We got away from him. But I learned about racism and drugs and how to drive and everything. My entire life was taught to me through the eyes of a black man.
Mm-hmm.
Still call him Dad today. We buried him a few years ago, but so when I came to Portland, I had that. So I was in a world that was really 20 years ahead of me. Because, like I said, I'd come from South Dakota, and you come to the West Coast, and you guys are far, far more advanced in your way of thinking and the technologies that you're using. Everything's just a little more advanced when you come to the West Coast.
And the music we were playing.
But I fit in because I had that forward thinking that was given to me that was shunned here.
Uh-huh.
You know, in my hometown, it was, I can't really say the words, but it's followed up by lover. And I was called that quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
You know, so, and it was just weird to me that you show love to people, you accept people and show love to people. And there is enough ignorance out there.
Well,
that can,
in a way, that's what the
you.
club was all about. It was about
yes.
love between a lot of people and understanding that we're all different, but we're all the same, and that people
Right.
can live their lives the way they want to, and they don't
Right.
have to sit there and live up to
Yeah, and
other
I didn't-
people's expectations.
I never felt the need that I had to dress in drag or be gay to be accepted there. I could come and enjoy the shows. And I did quite frequently. I could remember the tiki bar and the floor so vividly. The colored floor, the Saturday Night Fever colored floor.
Oh, the lighted dance floor. Yes.
Yes. And I know the stage, and a girl got caught and stuck up. What is it? Kind of in the backstage area. You go back there and you go up the stairs a little bit. It's where all your props were. Stage props and such. It was dark up there, and a girl got caught on a nail up there, and I was up there trying to get her unstuck. And I don't know why that's a memory of mine, but it is. We were up on the stage dancing, and she wandered off and got lost and stuck.
Well, you did a good thing. I mean, you know.
I don't know. I was just, like I said, I was a naive Dakota boy. I really could have been taken advantage of there, Lenny. I really could have. I was so naive. I was so young. I was so didn't know anything except for, Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
But you knew all these other people, and everybody was looking out for everybody else.
They were. And that's kind of the point of what I'm getting at here. I only met you and your husband once. And what was going on around that was, it was right around the time that something happened legally with gay marriage in Portland. Now, either they had just passed it or something, but it was a big deal, and you had a big party, and you gathered everybody around the tiki bar, and you and your husband, you made a speech that you were finally getting married, and I was there that night when you announced it. And these are just memories I have that I won't let go of, Lenny.
Yeah.
Lenny, I won't let go of these memories, Lenny. They're just so important to me.
Well, the people who came to the clubs, all of my clubs, whether it was Mildred's Palace, the first one, or the ending club, which was the Rage, they have strong memories. They in fact, they tell me it was probably the best time of their lives was going to the club, because for the first time in their lives they actually felt themselves. About 10 years ago, I guess it was. I don't know if it was made that long ago. They had a reunion for the city nightclub and all the clubs. And over 300 people showed up for this reunion. And It was just the most amazing evening. I was talking to all these different people, and they were all telling me their stories about what they did at the club and what the club meant to them, and so forth and so on, and et cetera, et cetera. And, it was like, a lot of people said it was like Club 54 on the West Coast in a way.
It was like a miniature version of it. I mean, I've never been to 54, but
no, I imagine and the shows with everybody sitting on the floor watching the shows, and the shows were put on by my customers. These weren't some people outside coming in. They would put on shows every Friday and Saturday night. We'd have half-hour shows that the customers themselves put on to, and they just loved it. They had so much fun, and they could just be themselves and be open about who they were, and just it made them feel good. And for a few hours every week, they felt good about themselves. They felt proud about themselves. And then they went back out into the real world. But they had those one time in the club.
Yeah, there was I vividly remember, too, it was exactly the time Madonna's book was released. Do you remember that? Madonna released that picture book.
Oh, yes.
That metal-bound picture book that was just all the rage. Everybody had to have it. I knew people that were getting safe deposit boxes and putting it in. I mean, we were homeless street rats, Lanny. I mean, we had nothing. But these kids were coming up with the money to buy that book and then put it in a safe deposit box. And I got to tell you, I didn't really care for the book, but I didn't care for Madonna too much. But I tell you what, when Vogue would come on in your club on a Friday night, Madonna would come on in Vogue, you couldn't almost breathe in that place. It would get so full of energy.
Yeah.
So full of positivity and just so full of...
Well, we'd have 400 or 500 people there. And,
yeah.
And they all would, certain songs would come on, like Vogue, and everybody would rush down onto that dance floor, and it would be just packed. They'd be on the dance floor, they'd be on the stage.
Yeah, and it would... Yeah. And then the energy in the room, the temperature would go up 25 degrees, and the energy would change, and it would shift. Everything would just shift, and you could feel it.
Yeah.
And that's what I really liked about being in there, Lanny. I just really liked that energy. I really liked being around that much. I don't even have the words for it.
Well, it's just...
But like I said, I was living it homeless.
Yeah.
And it was just an oasis for me. Just... most of the week was just miserable, sleeping under a bridge or trying to sell plasma to get, a little bit of McDonald's. But then the weekend would come,
Yeah.
And I could count on that. I could count on a beanbag.
Yeah.
There'd be a beanbag somewhere.
Yeah. Well,
and
listen.
Even while the club would be raging, I would sleep.
Yeah. And hearing this from you, it reinforces how important the clubs were, and it wasn't just for the entertainment and the disco value. It was for the sense of community, the sense of people being together, and the sense of empowerment, and would help people. When they would go out there, they wouldn't be ashamed that they were gay anymore. They wouldn't be ashamed they were a lesbian or whatever, and they wouldn't be ashamed that they were punk. A lot of the punk kids were dressed in black and all this kind of stuff. They were kind of discriminated against too. But at the club, they were okay.
Yeah. It is. I mean, it's sad that it ever was a problem or anybody ever had to be ashamed of who they were.
Well, we still have that right now. And in fact, we have the This is interesting about what's going on with the Democrats and the Republicans. The Republicans are trying to put that shame back again. They're banning books. They are telling people you can't be gay. They are trying to, don't say gay in Florida. All this kind of stuff. They're trying to recreate the 50s, for example, when everybody was Beaver Cleaver and stuff. And people aren't that way. And we can't allow that to happen again. We can't allow them to make people inhibited, to make people feel guilty, to make people feel ashamed. That's not what it's all about. And hopefully that's not going to happen. We'll see, won't we, in November? So that's
we will see. I mean, it's, like I said, when you want to talk about politics and religion, it's always so tense and so hard to sometimes even see through to the truth of anything.
Well,
we all fight for the truth and we all want the truth. But I don't think, honestly, that there's a lot of truth anymore in politics. I really do think we've been deceived.
Well,
at the highest levels,
Yes, we've had a president for 4 years, Donald Trump, who lies and lies and lies and lies. He tells lies all the time, and including the biggest ones about winning the election really in 2020 and all this kind of stuff. So we've gotten to this point here, and the thing is, religion and politics should never mix. We're supposed to have this wall of separation between the church and state in this country.
Yeah, but none of them do. I mean, none of them do, Lanny. All of them run on this platform of... I mean, I haven't seen a politician run on a platform that didn't involve some sort of Christianity.
Well...
in the last... I haven't seen one.
Yeah, well... Yeah,
even Joe Biden ran on the idea that he was a good Christian.
Oh, yes. Absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. Fortunately, we have different interpretation of what a good Christian is and what isn't. I talked at the beginning of the show about the evangelicals, and the evangelicals are just, for the most part, crazy in love with Trump. But there's a number of them who are coming to their senses and say, wait a minute, this guy is the absolute antithesis of everything that we're supposed to be believing in. And that's why I read this thing out here about the 7 deadly sins. Trump, exemplifies, as I say, 5.5 of the 7 deadly sins. And the evangelicals said that. Well, listen.
Curious about that half one.
Yeah, the half one is gluttony. Gluttony.
Oh,
See,
he can't quite get fat, right?
Well, no, he doesn't drink. He doesn't drink alcohol,
drink.
But he does weigh 243 pounds, and he does have a BMI of 30, so he's fat. So he got a half a point for gluttony, but only a half.
I got that same half point because I'm 250 pounds and I don't drink either.
Okay, half of the gluttony. Well, listen,
I'll
Joe,
have to take that half point too.
Rob, I want to thank you for calling in. I really appreciate it. You brought back
thanks for giving me your time, Lanny. I appreciate it too.
Yeah, you brought back some wonderful memories. I love talking about the club. In fact, there's a gentleman who is he's from, I want to say NPR, but he's doing a documentary on the club. He's been doing interviews.
I think I did read that, Lanny.
Yeah, he's doing interviews. He was up in Portland, and he got hold of the city nightclub, the one at 13 Northwest 13th and 13th and Burnside, and it's a sound studio now. But he actually did his interviews inside the sound studio where the city nightclub used to be. So that must have been quite a trip for the people he interviewed. And he's going to be interviewing me pretty soon, and he's doing a lot of interviews. So it'll be an interesting...
I'll look for that.
Yeah, I'm going to be watching for it too. Hopefully it'll be on Netflix or Paramount or one of these streaming
services. Get it on one of the big ones, huh?
Yeah. Well, Rob, thank you so much for calling in. You've made my day.
Thank you, Lanny. Me too. Sometimes it's hard for me to go back into that place in my head, but it was worth it for you right now.
Okay, thank you so much. Take care, Rob.
You too, man.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
All right. Wow, that was really cool. A ghost out of the past, you might say. This was all, my clubs were back I ran my clubs from 1977, Mildred's Palace, and then from 79 to 81, or 83, Metropolis at 3rd and Burnside, and then we ran the city nightclub, the first city nightclub. It was in the old Danmore Hotel building at 13th and Morrison. This was really the underground club. We didn't even have a sign out in front of the club with the name City Nightclub. You just, there's nothing there. You would just have to, it wasn't even an address. But the club was incredible. And when we moved, we were there for 5 years. And then that's when we moved to the new one at 13 Northwest 13th, at the corner of 13th and Burnside. That was a huge club with the lighted dance floor and everything. And it was just wonderful, wonderful things there. And that's where the club just really took off, and that's where a lot of the kids still talk. They still have a Facebook page called the Original City Nightclub. If you go to Facebook, you put it in there called Original City Nightclub. They still maintain contact with each other. Hundreds and hundreds of my customers. And like I said, a number of years ago, they had a reunion. And over 300 people showed up, and it was the most remarkable evening, meeting all these people who used to go to the club and that type of thing. So, it's going to be interesting. In 2027, that will be the 50th reunion of when I opened my first club, Mildred's Palace. I opened it in July of 1977. So maybe in 2027 we'll come back up there and we'll do another reunion and bring all the people back for another party. And I'm sure they will love that. Okay, so where do we go from here? Well, there's some other things I'd like to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about, I guess I should talk about politics and what's going on right now with the Democrats and the Republicans and the thing out here. It's very frightening. I don't know if you've read Project 2025. It's huge. It's 900 pages. And I certainly not read all of it. Even, what's really interesting, is Project 2025 is this 900 plus page compendium of what the Heritage Foundation has put together. And supposedly 150 of the people who put it together were with Trump. And Trump says that he not only doesn't he support it, he doesn't even know anything about it. and which is absurd, but that's just another one of this guy's lies. And it's really, really important. And here's the thing. You know, a lot of you probably listening here, most of you people listening here probably live here in California. California is a Democratic state. And Harris is going to win the state. But you know, there's some really important races going on here in California for the House. The Republicans are in charge of the House by just like 4 or 5 votes. We have 7, I believe it's 7 congressional seats that are held by Republicans here in California that are in play, that if the Democrats win them, the Democrats will take back over the House again. And this is so important because and hopefully they'll stay in charge of the Senate, because we've got to do things about women's reproductive health. The overturning of the overturning of Roe versus Wade has proved disastrous for the health and well-being of women in this country, and we've got to get that changed. And the only way we can change it, because we've got a Supreme Court that is just stuck with these Trump and pointy conservatives, it's going to have to be done legislatively, and it's only going to be done if the Democrats can take control. So that's important that you get involved. Hey, we have another caller on the line. Welcome to the show.
Hey, is that me? That's another caller?
Yes. Who am I talking to? We only have a few minutes left, but who's calling?
I'm Marie Rutledge. I'm calling to find out how the Brownie Marys are doing in Chicago.
Where Brownie Mary is not in Chicago, unfortunately. We're there in spirit, but Brownie Mary Democrats, of course, are only here in California. They're a state-chartered organization of the California Democratic Party. We're not part of the National Democratic Party. You know, I wanted to be a delegate to the convention. But even though I submitted all my papers and stuff, they disqualified me from being voted on. I don't know why they disqualified me. They wouldn't tell me why they disqualified me, but it kind of reminded me of the elections like we have in China and Iran. Unless you're approved by the government, you can't get on the ballot. And it seems that here in California, unless you're approved by the powers that be in the California Democratic Party, you don't get to be on the ballot to become a delegate. And very, very unfortunate. I raised a stink about it, but who knows if it's going to change in 2028. But Brownie Mary's there in spirit. And I know a couple delegates who are at the National Convention are members of the Brownie Mary Democrats. So we're there in a small way.
Thank you for telling me that. So that's something that we to get done again. I used to be involved with legalizing cannabis.
Uh-huh.
So maybe I can get back to work on getting Brownie Marys on the ticket. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, we've come a long ways in legalizing cannabis. You know, if people had told me 10 years ago that there'd be stores selling marijuana and farmers growing it legally in half the states of this country, I would have wondered what they'd been drinking. But that's the way it is now. It's not perfect. We've got a long ways to go, but we're certainly a lot better. One of the most important things is people are not being arrested and people are not being thrown in jail like they used to be. Remember, over 400,000 people every year were arrested and prosecuted for cannabis offenses. That's not happening anymore. And that's an amazing, wonderful thing.
Yes, indeed. And I am fully aware of so not to get verbally abusive. Okay.
Well,
I just will start getting verbally abusive with that. Yep. Uh-huh. Okay, then.
Well, thank you for calling in. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Take care. Bye-bye. Well, there we go. We have somebody from my old club, City Nightclub, and now we have someone from the Brownie Mary Democrats. Hey, This is wonderful. I want to thank both of you, Rob and Melissa, for calling in and talking about their things there. One thing I just want to mention, if you remember at the beginning of the show, I did read that part about cannabis and prayer changing the brain. If you found that interesting, I have published a little book called The Cannabis Chronicles. And it is a collection of 120 articles I wrote while I was writing for Culture Magazine over a decade. And that articles about cannabis and prayer was one of them. And that's how all the articles, they take a very nuanced look at the health benefits of cannabis, everything from pain relief to movement disorders to Alzheimer's to insomnia and even sex. There's 6 articles in my book about sex and marijuana. That's a titillating experience. If you'd like to find out about the book, it's available on Amazon it's a Kindle book. It's only $4.20. Just go to Amazon or go to Kindle, put in Cannabis Lanny, and that book will come up. Hey, and by the way, we're almost running out of time, but I would like to mention that, if you would like to, we have listeners to our show. You heard 2 of them call in tonight. We have people listening to our show. And if you would like to reach out to them with your business or your ideas, your website, or whatever it is you want to do, you should think about advertising on Lanny Sense. You can reach these people. Rates are very reasonable. You can get hold of the advertising manager, Mark Westwood. Thank you, Eric. Thank you. Mark Westwood. You can call him here at KCAA at 909-792-52222. That's 909-792-KCAA. Or you could just write him to, or you could send, you can contact me. Contact me and I'll put you in touch with Mark. And you can reach me by writing me to a very simple email address, rnlanny. That's registered. I'm a registered nurse if you didn't know that. rnlanny, Lanny, at AOL.com. That's right, AOL.com. That's how 20th century I am. AOL.com. rnlanny at AOL.com. And send me a message there. Say, hey, you'd like to learn more about advertising on the show, and I will let you know about it and how you can be advertised on our show and reach our loyal listeners and followers. Okay, so listen, we're running out of time once again, as we always do at the end of the hour. So I want to thank you for joining us tonight on Lanny Sense. Like I said, I'm kind of weird. It's a little strange because I bill myself as KCAA's resident gay, woke, liberal, pot-smoking, race-mixing, tree-hugging, left-handed, science-affirming, Jewish, humanist atheist, a white, evangelical Christian nationalist worst nightmare. But I'm not the worst nightmare of evangelicals for Harris. I'm not their worst nightmare because they've come to their senses. Anyway, you've come to your senses because you've come to Lanny Sense, the show that does more than just leave no listener behind. We just bring everybody in. Thank you for joining us. Please tell your friends about us. And if you want to hear my older shows, you can go to kcaradio.com and you'll scroll down. You'll see where my show is there. And you click on podcast, and all the past shows will come up. So thank you for joining us. We'll love to talk with you next week. Please, if you haven't called in before, please call in tomorrow. Call in every Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Let's talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. Good night.